With you, Mr. President, I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries, determined like you to maintain the most positive possible relations with the United States. Canada is a reliable, trustworthy, and strong partner of France, which shares our values and lives them through action during this age of economic and geopolitical crises.
Thank you so much, Mark Carney. We're more European than those lousy Americans, aren't we? Mark Carney is something else. When we come back, we're going to discuss exactly what that something else is. We'll be right back.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist.
Yes, please like the station. And if you do it right now, we can beat that YouTube suppression. Talk about it again. And subscribe, please subscribe. We're nearing 50,000. It's going to be a big plateau for me. I didn't think I'd get 10,000 people when I first started doing this. I'm grateful for every last one of you who watches every day. So welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. Took a brief hiatus yesterday. Nice to be back. It's amazing. You can't keep up with the news right now between Mark Carney and Poilievre and Donald Trump and the trade war and everything else. It's happening so fast. But be not deceived about Mark Carney. This guy is not what he appears to be. Canadians are not Europeans. We're actually Americans. We're part of the North American continent. Have you heard of that before, Mark Carney? That's the continent we're part of. We're not part of Europe. But of course, that's another slight against Donald Trump. But you know what scares me? Mark Carney's very thin-skinned. And especially when reporters ask him questions that he considers to be off limits, like, how much money are you worth? Where are your investments? You sit on the boards of 21 directorships. Is there any conflict of interest? We'll get to that in a minute. But look at this latest poll. Now, this is unnerving. This is an Angus Reid poll, which generally is accurate. If this was ECOS, I would dismiss it as internal liberal polling or liberal propaganda. I know ECOS has an axe to grind against conservatives. Angus Reid, not quite so much. And you can't keep ignoring polls and saying they're all inaccurate. But this one has the liberals at 42. I think what the conservatives at 37, which of course is almost the opposite of what the last poll I looked at from Abacus. It was 42 for the conservatives, I think 37 for the liberals. Anyway, the conservatives were ahead. Now they're talking about a liberal majority under Mark Carney. This is absolutely frightening, people. Now, Donald Trump is going to eat Mark Carney for breakfast. But that's exactly why Mark Carney traveled to Europe and came back with absolutely nothing. He came back, and reporters point this out to him. And we are expected to believe that Carney has raised liberal fortunes by anything from 20 to 25% since Justin Trudeau announced he was resigning. Just like we were supposed to believe that Mark Carney won 86% of the Liberal vote to become Liberal leader. Even in Chrystia Freeland's riding, 86%, 7% for Chrystia. Even in Karina Gould's riding, 4% for Karina, 86. It was just impossible to believe. These were baked. The results were baked. No question about it. And so here's Carney talking about his carbon his corporate carbon tax. And he doesn't really want to talk about this because he's pretending, of course, that he got rid of the personal carbon tax. Just made the legislation disappear. Except he can't do that without a vote in the House of Commons. And I'm not even sure the NDP would vote for that. God only knows with Jagmeet Singh running that party. It's down to 9% in this poll, by the way. I just showed you. The NDP is headed for extinction in this next election, apparently, if we believe it. But listen to Mark Carney talk about his corporate carbon tax.
Diversified trade to emerging Asia is to have a form of price on carbon. So we are able to think one step ahead. We're able to go out and see the world. We're able to help Canadian companies prepare. And you know what's going to happen? 5 years, 10 years from now, if I have the pleasure of being in front of you, you'll be asking me the question, if we didn't do this, if we didn't help our companies get more prepared, the Americans are going to start caring about this again. They have elections every 4 years. They cared a great deal about this 3 months ago. Now all of a sudden they don't care about it. They're going to care about it again. We have an enormous opportunity here in Canada. The United Kingdom has an enormous opportunity. France has an enormous opportunity. Europe has an enormous opportunity to leapfrog over American companies where they're trying to turn back the clock and look inwards. We're going to take that opportunity. We're going to take that opportunity. It's going to create jobs and it's going to create new markets for us.
No, he knows this is not going to create new jobs. This is going to steal jobs from Canada. They will go to the US where there is no corporate carbon tax. Why would you want to work in Canada when you're being penalized by the government? The option's clear. Move out. That's what Carney did to his own company, Brookfield Assets Management. He moved his own company to New York because he didn't want it affected by his policies. At the end of the day, for Mark Carney, it's all about money and power. There is no ideology with Mark Carney. Ideology is just the veneer. So today, he talks like a net zero Trudocrat. Tomorrow, he might sound a bit more moderate and I'm seeing conservatives, small c conservatives, libertarians on X, suggesting that Carney's sounding pretty good. No, he's not. And he'll do this little small c conservative act for a while, and then he'll do the liberal act as soon as he gets his majority government. But God forbid that should happen. Here's a little bit more about the corporate carbon tax.
Consumer carbon tax, but will you maintain the federal industrial carbon tax? And if so, are you maintaining the current government levels and increases?
Thank you for the question. It's an important point. Yes, we are maintaining what's called the output-based pricing system, which is the price that large polluters will pay. And there is an expectation, as you know, that price will rise over the course of this decade. What that does is it provides a very clear signal to large companies to make the investments now, to get their emissions down, to become more competitive. The taxpayer is not on the dime. The large companies have more options. The system's more efficient. We move forward together.
All right, are you buying this? So the taxpayer is not on the dime, and these corporations aren't going to pass this off. Now, I like what Poilievre said yesterday.
Saying that a common sense, Canada First Conservative government will repeal the entire carbon tax, including the federal backstop that requires provinces impose industrial taxes. There will be no taxes on consumers, no taxes on Canadian industries. Instead, provinces will continue to have the freedom to address this issue how they like, but there will be no federal obligation to impose the tax. We will also axe the tax on steel, aluminum, natural gas, food production, concrete, and other industries. Instead of taxes, we will use technology. Technology, not taxes, is the best way to fight climate change and protect our environment. While the Liberals tax businesses who use energy, Conservatives will cut taxes and boost incentives for those who bring down emissions. Carrot, not stick.
Now, my heart goes out to Poilievre. And no, I'm not in the bag for Pierre Poilievre. I like a lot of the things he says. but we have to keep pushing from the right. I always say that. I'm not going to give him carte blanche to do whatever he wants without criticism. But my heart goes out to him because he was 25% ahead of Justin Trudeau's Liberals. Now he's fighting. And he's attacking Donald Trump. He's going on about the carbon tax. But it sounds like he still believes in this net zero concept, which Mark Carney is the father of, the progenitor of net zero. Listen to Mark Carney's news conference in London, though. This is absolutely, shall I say, shocking. This man is so thin-skinned, he doesn't want to respond to reporters with those impertinent questions. And I'll comment about this. It's very significant. This tells you all you want to know about Mark Carney.
Thank you for coming.
You've seen the economic forecasts. They're not great. Are you certain that Canada can avoid a recession? And are you reopening trade negotiations with the UK?
There's a lot in that question. First off, look, this trade uncertainty, the actual tariffs, but then also the uncertainty around what other trade actions could be taken by the world's largest economy are having an impact. They're having an impact on the United States itself. That impact on the United States will continue to grow. The impact of weakening U.S. economy has an impact on everyone else. But of course it has a direct impact as well on the affected countries. It's not welcome. What we see is a number of things, a number of measures that we can take ourselves. We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We don't pretend to control policies of other countries. What we can control is our own domestic economic policy. There's many opportunities in Canada. It's a very strong economy, but it could be much stronger. We could have one Canadian economy instead of 13. We can build the millions of houses that Canadians need.
How are we going to build millions of houses with liberal regulations and taxes in place, Mark Carney? This guy can speak for minutes at a time without saying anything. He's mastered that dubious art or talent of saying nothing. And it's quite astounding. Let's listen to a bit more.
We can diversify our trading relationships, we can build new trading corridors, and we can fully realize what Canada is, which is an energy superpower in both clean and conventional energy, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to get stronger, while those who take trade actions get weaker.
Next question. Welcome back, Lise Doucette of
Come
the BBC.
Home. Come home.
Canadian,
yes.
Brunswicker. Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. You came on this first foreign trip making it clear that you needed public support for Canada as it faces not just a trade war. You say you were enthusiastic. That was your word today. Enthusiastic support as Canada faces not.
I've never seen such hostile media towards a Liberal. This is incredible. This is a loaded question. And this female journalist is obviously very angry with the non-answers Mark Carney is providing everybody right now.
It's a trade war, but threats to its sovereignty. You didn't get that in London. You didn't even get a press conference next to Sir Keir Starmer. Do you regret that? And if you can't take that back to Canada, tell us what is the top thing you achieved in the last 24 hours that you can go back to Canada and that you can say they have our back.
Great to see you, Lise. I'll say a couple of things. As I said when I was sworn in, which was just Friday, so you don't have to go far back in the BBC archives to find the clip. As I said then, we don't need another country to validate our sovereignty. We are sovereign. We don't need praise from another country. We are proud in and of ourselves. I would point out that...
I would point out he went to London, got nothing. He got absolutely nothing except a photo op with Keir Starmer, one of the most unpopular leaders in the world.
The Prime Minister made a point of referring to our sovereignty, made a point of referring to our shared sovereign in King Charles III. So if you're looking for some evidence to your question, you have both my statement of Friday and you have that of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Look, this 36 hours, and that is what it is effectively, away from Canada, the focus is on security, deepening security partnerships with France, with the United Kingdom. Those discussions are necessarily sensitive. They're revealed in the full course of time. I'm encouraged by the progress that's been made. Secondly, advancing the support for Ukraine is very necessary. You may have seen that I have invited President Zelensky to the G7. I look.
All right. As I predicted, he went to Europe to interfere in the peace process. He went to guarantee that Canada will continue to pour billions into the black hole of Kiev. And he invited Zelensky, corrupt clown Zelensky, to the G7. I don't even think Zelensky will be around in June, so I think he should probably not bother.
Forward to hosting him in Canada in June. There are a host of other measures that we are taking as part of the coalition willing to support that. And it also includes economic opportunities with respect to, for example, artificial intelligence, critical minerals, broadening out existing trade relationships that are functioning quite well. And I mean both CETA with respect to the provisional arrangements around CETA with respect to the European Union, where our trade has grown by more than 60%.
Did he just say critical minerals? What? Did he get an assurance from Zelensky? We have our own critical minerals. Why isn't he selling those to the U.S.?
And similarly with the UK FTA. So we're taking back a lot. But we're also taking back a deepening of our core partnerships, which is the objective. And we're 2/3 of the way through. And if you'd like to come to Iqaluit, you will see more. Thank you. My top priorities related to security, related to Ukraine, related to issues related that we will bring to the table in the G7, specifically in and around.
Shouldn't his top priority be to trade war with the United States and sitting down with Donald Trump? Shouldn't that be his top priority? Why is Ukraine one of his top priorities? He has absolutely no control over that process.
AI, critical metals and minerals, and the evolution of the commercial system. Thank you.
And he said it again.
Madame.
Mr. Carney, Stephanie Levitz, Globe and Mail. We understand that you have now placed your assets in a blind trust, so you don't know what's happening to them going forward, but you knew what they were going into that blind trust. So what are they?
Look, Stephanie, I follow the rules of the ethics commissioner.
Oh, touchy. Look, Stephanie, I'm not used to journalists speaking to me this way and demanding I talk about my personal fortune any more than I explain why I'm in pictures with Ghislaine Maxwell. Don't want to talk about that either. I can't wait for somebody in the mainstream media to bring that subject up at a Carney news conference. But of course, he just slides past this. Yeah, Brookfield Assets Management was sheltering potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in Bermuda, not paying any taxes. It was paying about 5% corporate tax in Canada.
I'm following them well in advance of any of the requirements, as you know, because I know you know this. You know that these requirements come into effect in months. We're talking days after I became Prime Minister. So I'm complying with the rules of the Ethics Commissioner, going through the processes and all these things that are necessary. And I will remind you, and I'll remind Canadians again, that the Leader of the Opposition cannot find it. And look, you look at the questions.
Now, what does this have to do with anything? Every time he's asked about his assets, he points his finger at Pierre Poilievre, who doesn't have a security clearance because he doesn't want to be in the government's pocket. What does one have to do with the other? Of course, nothing at all. But this is a man adept at not saying anything.
This evening, you look at the nature of the discussions. Look at the nature of discussions I had with the President of France, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The Leader of the Opposition would not be capable of having those discussions because the Leader of Opposition refuses to get his security clearance, something that it took me a few weeks to get. And he has been the Leader of the Opposition for 3 years. So I comply with my responsibilities. I comply with the rules. well in advance.
Must have had something to do with your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein if it took you
And
3
the
weeks.
leader of the opposition doesn't take his responsibilities at a time of, well, you should take these responsibilities at any time, but it's particularly remarkable given the stakes in global geopolitics at the moment.
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance.
Ooh.
Point final.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
Someone spent most of his life in the private sector.
Now he gets a question from Rosemary Barton, of course, who always is friendly to Liberal leaders. But I think he's remembering that interview he had, and she asked him about those 21 directorships. And he claimed they're all philanthropic, which was a flat out lie.
No possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector.
I'm sorry, look inside yourself, Rosemary? What is this, Father Mark Carney offering spiritual advice to the reporters? What is he talking about? There's ill will from the CBC?
At a time of crisis for our country, I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
Incredible performance. Said nothing. Absolutely nothing. And he's increasingly in conflict with the mainstream media. Interesting. Maybe they realized that they pushed this guy. They promoted Mark Carney. They made sure he had no tough questions to deal with during the Liberal leadership campaign, where he just conducted little town hall meetings, coffee clutches with 50 to 100 people, and recited the same talking points every night. Read the same speech every night. That was his victory speech. He couldn't even bother to write a different speech when he won the leadership. But, of course, he visited a steel plant last week and looked like an absolute buffoon with his little hard hat on. And notice they didn't have people standing behind him, because when Trudeau stood before a bunch of construction workers with hard hats, one of them took his hat off and covered his head with it. You remember that visual? Carney was afraid that would happen to him. But here's Poilievre. At least he's got the guts to have the Steelworkers standing behind him. Although I don't like those photo ops, because people are forced to do that, and they shouldn't be.
You. I know that this is a very difficult and stressful time. Some of you have already got layoff notices. Others are worried you might face them in the future. You're scared. You're stressed. You don't know what's going to happen. I want you to know that Canadians are with you. We will fight for your jobs, and we will make sure the supports are there in the event of layoff. We'll make sure that EI provides payment promptly to help you keep food on the table, and we will work to get you back into a paycheck as soon as possible. And I once again say to Donald Trump, why would you go after these people? These are great Canadian people. American workers, just like them, are going to lose jobs if this continuing trade war insanity goes on. There is no good reason to do this to these good people. Stop the tariffs, stop the chaos, let's solve this problem, and that will mean that workers on both sides of the border can get their lives back, and both the nations could be stronger, safer, and more secure. We will always be a sovereign, independent nation. We will never be the 51st state. We will always be proudly Canadian, and we will fight for the Canadian promise. I go further to say that that Canadian promise has always been the reason for my political career. We want this to be a country where hard work means anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, that a hardworking person gets a great life on a safe street in a beautiful house under our proud flag.
And that, of course, where Poilievre needs to go. Safe streets, safe housing, affordable housing. The home ownership dream. That's when he's at his best. When he's talking in a Reagan-esque fashion about a shining city on a hill, a freedom in this country, and what opportunity can exist if we get rid of the net zero liberals. But unfortunately, we don't need tirades against Donald Trump right now. I would love to see Pierre Poilievre sit down with Donald Trump. I think the two of them could have a wonderful meeting of minds and sharing. But we will see.
Is broken after 10 years of the Trudeau-Carney Liberals. The lost Liberal decade has seen over the last 7 years $500 billion of investment leave our country for the U.S. Our per capita GDP has been the worst growth among all of our competitors. Housing costs have doubled and gone up faster than in any other G7 country. And now the Liberals think they should be rewarded with a 4th term in office. Furthermore, they brought in a carbon tax in this law. This law is still in place, even though Mr. Carney has signed a fake executive order to hide the tax for 35 or 40 days leading up to the election.
So you see what Carney's done here. He has essentially frozen the carbon tax at zero for the next, 30 to 60 days, during which time, of course, he doesn't have to talk about his personal finances either. He's got 120 days to do that. I predict we're going to have an election call at the end of this week or early next week. Carney's going to run now, because the more he stays around, the more he flaps his gums, the more he reveals what's really inside of his heart, soul, and mind, the less Canadians are liking him. It's obvious with the mainstream media. They're already fed up with his lies. They're already fed up with his disingenuous explanations. They're already had it with his mendacity. So what Poilievre is saying here is right.
It is still in place, and it applies across the board. The tax is scheduled to go up 300% over the next 5 years, and hiding it for a few weeks will not change that. Furthermore, the full carbon tax also applies to industries like those here at Iveco. Iveco makes hot-rolled steel wire and steel billets, and these taxes drive up the cost of the entire domestic steel industry. Mr. Carney has said that he wants to expand the industrial carbon tax beyond the already eye-watering increases the government has passed into law. He specifically singled out steel in an interview he did on CTV. He said that Canadians don't buy steel, they don't need steel, and therefore it won't do any harm to tax steel.
Incredibly, that was the CTV Atlantic interview, and I've shown it several times, where Mark Carney makes the preposterous statement that nobody uses steel anymore. He was never challenged by that journalist. Anybody with 2 eyes, or even one, can identify steel throughout your house, throughout the city, through everywhere. Steel is still a relevant commodity. And for Carney to make a ridiculously stupid statement that nobody uses it anymore, he needed to be challenged.
Although he did admit that the tax would drive up the cost of an automobile by just $200. I don't think anybody believes that. Remember when the Liberals told us that the earlier carbon tax wouldn't cost you anything? We learned later that that was not true. Carney's proposed shadow carbon tax will be bigger than Trudeau's carbon tax. And it's ultimately a trick. Hide the tax before the election and then bring it back bigger than ever after the election. This was a bad idea before the Trump tariffs. But now that Trump is hitting Canadian industry with a massive tariff, Carney is saying that he will impose a massive carbon tax on Canadian businesses. The combination of Trump's tariffs and Carney's carbon taxes would be a disaster for the workers behind me. Workers would lose wages, consumers would pay more.
We are headed towards a Great Depression if both of these phenomena continue. Carbon tax, along carbon tariff, and the trade war continuing. Mark Carney is oblivious to this, and he knows, and Poilievre is right on when he says this. He knows he can run now, potentially win an election, even a majority government, before any of this material kicks in. He knows he can do this. When I come back, some concluding remarks. Some of the best merchandise in the business. I like it. I really do. And it's all original concepts from the show. And I thank you for buying it. Get yourself a mug. Get yourself a freedom mug. Get yourself one of those hoodies that you believe in freedom. We are dangerously close to another 4 years of liberal tyranny. Mark Carney is going to be worse than anything Justin Trudeau ever delivered. This guy takes himself very seriously. He's threatened to use the Emergencies Act to push his agenda through. He will take our freedom away. He's a globalist, and he thinks we're European. Thanks for watching today, folks. I'll be back again tomorrow with all the news you need to know. And let's continue to resolve to resist Mark Carney, because he is threatening this country in a way that is even worse than Justin Trudeau. Thanks for watching today.